Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre, and this is from Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam's novella, Glorious Fiends. You know this man? Roxanne squared her shoulders and formed a wall of her body beside Medusa. The Guardian. Max Hyde reached forward and wrapped their hand around Roxanne's forearm. Yes, they know me, he said. And I know you, Roxanne, the vampire queen, the vampire lover. Oh, you have many names, Roxanne, in the underworld. He struck his oar against the floor. The vampire battle axe, the vampire wench. My favorite, the vampire harpy. For you are a harpy, Roxanne. You take what does not belong to you. The man lunged forward and disappeared in a cloud of mist, then reappeared behind Roxanne and wrapped one hand around her throat. He rammed his oar at her back at the space that hit her hard, but she ducked before it struck. The tip nicked Hyde's arm, and as he yanked it free, blood poured from the wound. Hyde held their arm to their chest to slow the bleeding. On the floor, Medusa struggled to squirm away, but her palm slipped upon the snake's slick skins. Her face smacked the marble floor. And what do they call you? Roxanne balanced, crouched on the front of her red heels. They call me many names as well. He readjusted his cloak. He paced in front of them. As he moved, 100 skulls formed a misty train behind him. You may have heard of some. Roxanne hoisted Medusa over her shoulder, stood and sprinted through the snakes. Her heels dug into the reptiles, grinding them into the floor. Blood gathered on her feet. Roxanne hoped that Hyde had followed suit, but she could not stop to make sure, and the doctor had always been decent at taking care of themselves. Roxanne burst through a door and sprinted through the halls until she came to a door half propped open. She crossed the threshold and fell down and down, clinging to Medusa's body, deafened by Medusa's screaming in her ear. Glorious Fiends by Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam, our guest today. Welcome, Bonnie. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? I feel like I want you to read my excerpts instead of me. That was very animated.
Well, do I get the job when the audiobook rights are sold? Um, Maybe I'll take it when it's offered. You don't have to answer no. My agent will talk to your agent.
Okay,
How
sounds
does
good.
how does it feel to be here in the virtual world? Are you freaked out?
No, no, it feels good. I downloaded Second Life, I think about 10 years ago and
Oh my
and
God.
moved around in it for a second, but couldn't quite figure it out. So it was really nice having you explain some things to me.
Second Life is gigantic. See, this is the thing that I've tried to sort of document for many years, almost 20 years. And the fact of the matter is, I think the statistics are still that about 100,000 people sign up to Second Life every day, and most people only, I think there's an average they stick around for 3 minutes. And there's many attempts to figure out why that is. And I think for many people there is no clear um I don't know, not reason to be here, but it's not immediately um obvious to people, which is weird to me because I feel it's super obvious what this could be. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like, when you're in a virtual game world, you get instructions about exactly where to go and what to do, but there's not that
Correct.
immediate thing when you jump into Second Life.
Absolutely. It's just like life, right? You pop
Yeah.
out of the womb, and of course, babies are crying because they don't know what's happening. I mean, being born and coming out of the your mother's womb is almost like almost like appearing on the Second Life welcome area. But we're not here to talk about Second Life. We're here to talk about your work, and I want to know what you would say this book is about. The novella Glorious Fiends that I prepared for the program. I looked into your other work as well, but that's the one I read. And I would say if somebody would ask me, so what are you reading? I wrote this down. I would say this book is about a badass vampire. Her name is Roxanne, and she and her two monster buddies hang out in the great library of evil, where the head librarian is a spider. So that would be my pitch because, and I know here in the audience, there is one audience member from Norway, Little Brett, is her name, and she's probably buying this book based on my description in the next 20 seconds because there's a library. The library is the library of the Great Library of Evil, and the head library is a spider, and there's vampires and other stuff. But anyway, how do you uh usually explain this book?
Yeah, I usually explain it as very similarly. It's three monster friends, and they are having to battle the guardian of the underworld. And so I took a bunch of my favorite '80s horror movie tropes and basically pitted them against Hammer horror tropes, and
Oh,
had a nice gory time with it.
were you influenced by the 80s? You weren't around in the 80s. I
I
was.
was I was born at the end of the '80s, but I love '80s horror films. I like the
Lost
classical
Boys?
the practical effects. Yeah, Lost
Uh-huh.
Boys. Lost Boys is great. Um, and then The Fly was one of
Oh
my
my God.
influences here, not '80s. What that's more in the
No, wait a
2000s.
minute. But the Fly, no, no, the original Fly, David Cronenberg's not the original. There was one in there was actually one in the 50s or 60s or something. But David
Yeah, the
Cronenberg's Fly
Cronenberg. Yeah,
was
yeah.
that was 80. That was okay. Somebody look this up and put it in the
Yeah.
local chat. Now we're starting to talk about Second Life sign up and babies coming out of the womb. Now we're talking about David Cronenberg movies, but
I'm
Hammer films. Yes,
mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, I'm a huge Cronenberg fan. I like the body horror.
I find it interesting. No, this is an aside, but since we're on it, I find it so interesting that you were born at the end of the 80s, and you're fascinated by 80s. I was born in 1970, and I came sort of into awareness of popular culture in the 80s, but I was much more into the 70s. Well, actually, I was alive in the 70s, but it's weird because I didn't really perceive that kind of 70s. I was not allowed to watch Dawn of the Dead at age 4. I don't think my mother would stand for that. She's not around to answer. But why do you think you were more influenced by the 80s than by the 90s?
Oh, I think I was also influenced by the '90s. I mean, I'll listen to Spice Girls and Backstreet Boys and sing all the lyrics, but, my sister's 13 years older than me, so a lot of what I
Ah,
was interested in came from her.
that's it. Usually older siblings.
Mhm.
That's the same thing with music too. When you ask
Mhm.
people and they have an older sibling and introduces them to, I don't know, Hendrix or something. Um, Very cool. So those are the influences. Um, Now, of course, this is an educational program, and maybe kids are watching. What's with all the violence? There's a
Well, like
lot
I
of
s
violence.
yeah, well, I mean, it's a horror story, so I do have people come up to me a lot at conventions where I'm sitting at a table and they're asking, they've got a little kid with them and they're looking for some YA, and I have to tell them this is absolutely not a book for children. I wanted to explore body horror and just have a fun, gory time, and so that's what I did.
And that's fantastic. And do you think that we talk about it often here on the book club because the competition, the biggest competition of books, I mean, this sort of how I see it, is really audiovisual entertainment, which is very ubiquitous. What can you make the case for people picking up a book? How would you convince someone to pick up a book of this genre with body horror and all sorts of things? And you do a fantastic job of describing. I mean, there's an art to describing this kind of stuff. But what would you say to someone who says like, yeah, why pick up this book? I can watch uh yeah, Cronenberg on repeat, Videodrome, The Fly, whatever the newest stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel like what books do well that visual audio media, kind of can't do as well is explore like the interior life of a character. I mean, you can have a
Mhm.
voiceover in a movie or a TV show, but it often comes off pretty cheesy, unless it's done by a masterful director or writer. So I
Mhm.
feel like exploring that interior life is something that I've always gone to books for, and in that way, it kind of increases my empathy towards characters. And I
Hmm.
mean, one thing that I was trying to do with this book was make you feel empathetic towards monsters because the
Hmm.
monsters are the protagonists. So
Hmm.
can you feel connected to these characters who are doing these evil things? And yes, they're doing them in a fun way, but they're still pretty evil. They're still killing people and
Hmm.
being gross about it.
And the character, one of the characters that I read, MX Hyde. How do I pronounce it? MX, what does it stand for?
Mix. So it's
Uh-huh.
the non-gendered version of Miss or Mr. And
Hmm.
basically what I wanted to do that's straight from, Hammer Horror, the movie oh gosh, Sister Hyde, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. And so I wanted to combine those two
I've
characters.
never seen that.
They're
Hmm.
oh, I like that one. That's one of my favorite Hammer. I don't actually go for the more traditional Hammer horror. I kind of, as I was exploring the Hammer horror movies, I went for some of the ones that aren't talked about as much, such as that one and the Gorgon. And so those are two that are obvious influences here. But in the end of that, you have the two characters combined into one, and so it's male and female, and so I wanted to explore that kind of gender binary pushed
That's
into one
awesome.
person.
That is really well done, and I just threw because the Hammer films reference, they did escape me as I'm not an expert. I'm aware of Hammer films sort of peripherally how they fit in the culture, but yeah, I have no idea of the scope of the movies. Of course, because I'm a book nerd, Bonnie. What came to mind is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the original book by Robert Louis Stevenson, and I put
Mhm.
up here. This is from Wikipedia. This is the cover from 1886. Amazing. And so you have this character, this non-binary character. Um, in this book. How is that does this come naturally to include a character like this? And if people think this is a dumb question, let me just clarify that I think it is absolutely awesome that modern books of any genre are much more inclusive than the books that came out when I was growing up. It was very rare to see representation outside of gender norms, of patriarchal structures, and so on and so forth. And we live in a time where this is possible, and people write different characters with outside of the binary gender norms. People also write disabled characters. And so the reason I'm asking is because sometimes there is sensitivity readers are available.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that would have been necessary in this case, but
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
take it where you will.
yeah, I'm a bisexual woman, and all of my friends in the writing community are non-binary, trans, LGBTQ plus. And so I'm constantly reading, books about non-binary characters. I am cisgender, but
Hmm.
I did a lot of research and do a lot of research. And so I do, I'm very interested in a non-binary point of view. I've thought about it and come to the conclusion that I'm cis, but I do like to include characters that are beyond what I am.
Yeah. And I think that in I don't I'm not here to suggest that you have to be of a certain identity in order to be a sort of allowed to write it. And if you live in if your world consists of people who are representing that culture, then I don't think you need a sensitivity reader. I don't think that that is necessary in all cases. I think it can help in specific cases, especially I think with disability. I think that's useful.
Hmm.
I do want to bring this up because we live in such a polarizing environment where, I mean, I have interactions like that almost every day where people say, "Yeah, it's gone too far." Actually, yesterday I had an interaction with a baker at the bakery where they said Pippi Longstocking. You may remember Pippi Longstocking.
Yes.
Swedish. I mean, maybe for Europeans more formative than for Americans, possibly. But Pippi Longstocking, her father was a N-word king in the original book. Um, an N-word king, and they're changing it to South Sea King. And the baker was outraged about that. I don't know. I'm getting completely
Mhm.
off a tangent, but it was a ridiculous conversation. She got outraged. She said, they're changing everything. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I think that's totally okay. I think it's important to
Mm.
other, you know, historical things that we need to put them in context and we need to know how people talked back then. So, but for a children's book like that to change that, that I think that's useful. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you
And
think?
to do as little harm as possible to people when really, like, what harm is it in changing it? I mean,
Yeah.
you're doing more good than nostalgic harm by changing that word.
Absolutely. I think it's a nuanced issue in the sense that right now there's a discussion about a book that depicts the rise of fascism in Germany, and there are some words that people want to take out, and I don't think that, and that's a book from 53, and there are some words that people want to take out, but my personal opinion would be to not do that in that instance because that depicts despicable people who talked like that, and it creates it's the same thing like with Tom Sawyer, let's say, or something like that. But I think that i- i- is important to know what the atmosphere was at the time. No?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's, probably up to each person what their thoughts on the matter are of reading, older literature that has words that are harmful in it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. From what they would like to read. Absolutely.
Right. Or show to
And
their children.
yeah, and I actually think in a university context or in a high school context, it's completely legit, even important to let people know that we're going to read, let's say, historical material. In other words, a trigger warning, I think, is is
Hmm.
is warranted, but to change those texts in print, and oftentimes the impetus here is just a commercial consideration of publishing houses not to get into trouble and not sell any books there. I don't think there are any cultural reasons for that. But anyway, okay, we went way too far. Here's a quote that Shyla prepared these slides. You say I was inspired by a lot of the 80s horror that I've been watching lately with the practical effects. So it's all very gooey, it's gross, but it's gross in a little bit of a campy way. It doesn't really feel like it's super real. So that is kind of what I was going for in this book. And I was actually looking for the collage because I know that Shyla made a collage um, of 80s, and I can't find it. Shyla sent me that collage of 80s inspirations. Oh, no, no, no. Here it is. That's actually the one. That's not only 80s, that's vampires. What's the deal with vampires, Bonnie? Why are you so fascinated by vampires?
That comes from the Hammer horror thing again. The character of Carmilla in the gay vampire, and I think that one thing that's interesting about vampire mythology is that so often it's been coded very, very queer, and so it kind of felt natural to have my lesbian vampire be inspired by Carmilla.
But the vampires are also, there is something I mean, I'm not, the first one to point this out. There is something very sexual about vampires in general. No?
Oh yeah, I mean they're putting their mouths on your neck,
Hmm.
taking your blood away.
Hmm. Not only that, there's also other things happening in this book that make it not YA.
Yes. Yeah, definitely not YA. Yeah, a lot of my work deals with various elements of sex and sexuality, and so it was totally natural for me to include it, even in a monster book where I got kind of freaky with it.
Does that do you this is interesting. Do you feel like you have or do your readers have an expect? Are you at a point where you feel like, okay, my readers have a certain expectation of certain things, like the Hammer film people, or maybe even David Cronenberg, where they go, oh shit, I got to put that in, because people expect that element, like you with
Oh,
the sex. I mean, I have only read this novella, so I don't know. People in the
yeah.
audience go like, oh, I'm going to read all of her stuff because
I
now they're
would
expecting it.
Yeah, I would say that insofar as if, I have readers who read everything that I write, then they probably would expect a few things like
Like what?
weird sexuality, weird sex at some point, food. My husband's pointed out to me as he's read several of my short stories and novels that I have a thing with food being horrific, an element of horror. At some point, someone will eat something in a very like grotesque way.
Aha. In a
And
kind of a grotesque, gross.
yeah, like using food as like a stand-in or a what's the word? A hint that something juicy is going to happen later in terms of gore or
Mhm.
violence,
Or sex.
or sex. Yeah.
Okay, can the
Uh,
camera zoom in, because this is you're very weird in the best possible way. I'm really surprised that you didn't stay in Second Life 10 years ago. I mean, you're the prime um, customer. But anyway, no, but on the table, can the camera zoom into the table? There is a duck in there. Oh, I was just informed that I interrupted you. You were about to add another point. I'm the worst interviewer on the planet. Go ahead, Bonnie.
I was also gonna say humor. I have a dark sense of humor, and I think that that would be something that's expected in all of my fiction.
Good. Now I have the overview. Now the camera can zoom into the duck on the table, because I read on your website you have a rubber duck collection. Why is that? Expand on
That
this.
Yeah, that's a super simple story. I just thought, rubber ducks were cute, and they were coming out when they were coming out with all the fun ones, the little devil ducks and stuff when I was in high school, middle school. And so, I started buying a few, and then people noticed, as they do when you have a couple of some item, and then they start to buy you that item over and over again. And so,
Mhm.
I have pared down the duck collection over the years, but I do still have some in my bathroom.
Awesome. Also on the table, in front of the duck, is a cube. Now everything in Second Life is made of cubes, but this is a very special cube. I don't know if you can see it, but this cube is tied to a. We're talking about horror movies all day long here, but this is a very important movie. And if the camera can zoom back in the back of the venue, there's another version of this cube, and it's a lot bigger, and it's also rotating. So do check this out. Now, where is this from? This is from a movie called Hellraiser.
Mhm.
Hellraiser is an absolutely amazing film. The first film came out in 1987, and I believe it was directed by Clive Barker, the
Mhm.
writer um, of the original story or book. And Hellraiser in your book, or in the novella, is a very obvious inspiration.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yeah, the one of the villains and one of the love interests of the main vampire is essentially a Cenobite.
What is a Cenobite?
Okay, so I've only seen the first Hellraiser, so if there's people in the audience who have seen, the ones that explore the origins of the Cenobites, they could speak to it better than I could. But they're the creatures from the dimension of pleasure and pain who come and take the people away who solve the puzzle and tear them to pieces.
And thankfully, Monkey just put this in the local Second Life chat. She put the link in there from hellraiser.fandom.com
Mhm.
/wiki/Cenobite. Here we go. And Pinhead is the main dude there,
Yes. Yeah.
and your character is called Needleskin. Um, Very cool sort of homage in the book. Yeah, Hellraiser, uh, really awesome, but not as awesome as your book. I mean, I wrote a song in my band at the time. It was called "Demons to Some, Angels to Others." If
Oh.
somebody wants to buy the original demo on cassette, I think I have 3 left or something. Um, Send a self-addressed stamped envelope and allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. Totally 80s. Now, I think it's time to read. Let's read something. And let's read from Glorious Fiends. Oops, let me bring up the book stand. Um, Let me bring up the book stand, and you can walk stand up, and the book stand will magically appear.
Okay.
And ooh, Bonnie likes to fly. Look,
All right. I've hold on a minute. My camera
she's
controls.
flying like her character. I don't know if her characters can fly. There we go.
Maybe not in
Uh,
this book.
and set us up,
Let's see.
set this up for us briefly. Where, yeah, you're standing. Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna move
Great.
the book
Okay. Good. I did my
stand.
best.
Oh, this is perfect. We like to put the guests through the ringer a little bit here. The book stand changes itself perfectly aligned. Now, set this up, please. Where are we? What do we need to know? What's the scene?
Yeah. This is close to the beginning. I like to read close to the beginning of a book so that it requires a little less setup. But basically, Roxanne's two friends have passed. They've been killed by the demon hunter, Lee Vansing, and she's trying to resurrect them, but she has to wait for the perfect time. And she has gone and gotten a snack at the local bar. It's a man, but she's been feeding off of it because she's very impulsive and, a very selfish character, and so she's kind of fed too much on him. But she does need his blood for the sacrifice, so then she has to figure out something out.
Okay, here we go.
The ceremony is referring to the ceremony to resurrect. The ceremony was a simple one, requiring only the new moon and a drop of human blood upon the talismans. But Roxanne's stomach growled. She would need energy to fulfill the ritual, simple or not. A week ago, she had brought a man's body to the library and left it in the foyer. Well, she could eat her meal and take the blood she needed from the stout man's body at the same time. She closed the great doors and bent down to the man. She touched his face. "You have been good to me," she said, "despite your gender." She sunk her teeth into the only virgin skin left upon his neck and found that she had drained him dry. Chapter 2. Panic rose into Roxanne's chest. She could not wait another month. She calculated the time it would take her to walk the tunnels into town. The moon's first hour would be long past before she returned. Roxanne slammed shut the door and frantically examined the hall with its spiderwebs in the corners. She paused. The spiderwebs were gone. They had been swept away. She searched the floor. She had seen footsteps there once or twice. She had ignored them, as she was wont to ignore things that would take too much effort to figure out. Now she realized with a start that footsteps led to feet, which led to people. Roxanne walked the halls, her vision unimpeded by the dark. She looked for any sign of life. The halls snaked. They twisted and disappeared. She turned many times before she found what she was looking for, a single strand of hair dangling from the knob of a door. She opened the door. On the other side, a white-haired woman dusted a bookshelf. The woman wore a black pencil skirt over a round bulb of an ass, glasses with 20 or so magnifying lenses jutting off the frames in all directions, and suspenders. She turned to face Roxanne, and Roxanne was surprised to see that she looked young, in the middle years of a human life, and that her lips were painted blue as the sky that Roxanne never got to see. "Can I help you find something?" the woman asked. "Are you not surprised to see me?" Roxanne advanced. "If you think I am not apprised of everything that happens in my library, you are sorely mistaken." The woman faced Roxanne. "Oh, I know all about you, Roxanne. I know that you intend to bring back your friends. I know that you drained a man in the hall and left me quite a mess to clean. I understand that you need blood. I have a feeling you're going to try for mine." Roxanne grinned to reveal the threat of her sharpened incisors. You must believe that you're smart. The woman sighed. I'm the librarian of the great library of evil. I understand evil. Are you human? Roxanne asked. Will your blood bring back the monstrous dead? More or less, the librarian said. For a moment, the air crackled. Roxanne pounced. A drum beat. The librarian dodged. I'm not without my own tricks. Roxanne pounced again. The librarian dove into a dark corner. She scurried through the shadows. Roxanne moved with enhanced speed. She jumped to join the dark. She reached out to grab the librarian's arm. Her hand wrapped around something thin and hairy. She yanked her hand into the light. She held the limb of a giant spider. She grinned, intrigued by the nature of her new foe. The limb was trying to disappear, shrinking ever smaller with the shadowed spider body attached. Roxanne cackled as she yanked the Spider Woman from hiding, startling her into a return to human form. The woman's face appeared on the spider's face, and Roxanne laughed to see that the little magnifying glasses were lenses for the librarian's spider eyes. She was a clever broad. Too bad that Roxanne would not have more time to play. As the spider's neck morphed into the woman's neck, Roxanne sunk her teeth into the smooth of the librarian's skin. And then we move on to the ritual. The ritual was as simple as a ritual could be. Roxanne slurped blood from the librarian's wound and spit it upon the stone head of Medusa, then the knife of Mix Hyde. Roxanne drank the rest of the librarian's blood as she waited for the resurrections of her best friends to complete. The bodies grew slowly from nothing. Roxanne tapped her foot impatiently as she watched first the organs, then the veins, then blood, then fat, then skin, as she watched the bodies of her friends form on the table right before her eyes. The gore was the most fascinating part, when the gooey bits melded together and the veins tried to pump, gurgling with new fluid. Toward the end of the process, Roxanne stood and waited beside the table, eager to pull Medusa and Mix Hyde into her embrace. She watched the hair form upon their bodies. For Mix Hyde, a mane of black in their half and half style, long and silky on the feminine side, and cropped in a shoulder length bob on the masculine side. Dr. Hyde's facial features adjusted themselves accordingly. The plump feminine lips met their thin lips in the middle. Their high cheekbones contrasted their flatter gaunt. The prominent chin merged into the square side. The hair down their body grew in, light and thin, and also dark and heavy. Medusa was no less intriguing, her brown hair sprouting from her head and the snakes pushing forth from the skin of her scalp, lying as still as she lay. Their sleek black skin, their closed slit eyes. She wanted to reach out, to touch one, but stopped herself, unsure if it would affect the resurrection process. Medusa's white dress entered the world like water poured and frozen where it touched the air, a soft nightgown of a dress with buttons down the middle and a high, frilled collar. Mix Hyde's clothes stitched themselves upon their body, their tailored suit with half a red bow tie at the collar, half a string of pearls, the shirt half white, half red. The ensemble was dapple in its strange duality. They were always a sharp dresser, whereas Medusa went out in whatever she always wore, unconcerned with the way others might see her, since they could never see her eye to eye without losing their humanity. My friends, Roxanne said out loud, and as the words left her lips, the eyes of Medusa and Mix Hyde fluttered open. Roxanne? Mix Hyde said, sitting up upon the table. You did it! Roxanne embraced her friend. I did it, Roxanne whispered.
And that is Bonnie Joe Stufflebeam reading from Glorious Fiends. Thank you, Bonnie. That's fantastic reading. God, awesome. Please have a seat.
All right, I'll
And
head back over.
that is a fantastic introduction to the things that we talked about, the gruesome, gooey body horror aspect and the dialogue. It's interesting. The talk a little bit about world building. I mean, I had the sense that it's fairly sparse, which really suited this book. I mean, some people go into extreme detail, what period something is, or if this is sort of
Mm-hmm.
is this a past period of our world? Is this a parallel world? What is this? Talk a little bit about the decisions that behind you doing what you did. I mean, what did you do here?
Yeah, well, so I figured, most people who are going to read this are going to be horror fans. And so when they see Vampire, Roxanne, they'll understand the world that it's set in. And that is, the hammer horror, the sort of Technicolor England-esque
Hmm.
horror background. It's not modern day. There's no cell phones. They do ride in a carriage at one point. And
Hmm.
so since there was already that
Carriage
shorthand
tavern
built
also.
in,
That's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
tavern. There's a tavern in the first scene. So, you know, I felt like players. I'm a game writer in my day job, but I felt like readers were going to be able to fill in those blanks, so I
Mhm.
didn't need to spend quite as much time letting them know beforehand.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Oh, game writer. Okay, what does a game writer to do?
Yeah, I am a game writer in the most traditional sense of the word. I write the words for a mobile game.
Hmm.
And on the side I dabble in learning programming at this point. It's not not a skill that's super honed at this juncture, but I work for a mobile game and I write the words and the dialogue and the branching choices.
Now, are you excited about the fact that AI is going to take everything that you and all your colleagues have written and will be writing and are writing? Will AI will put that in a big database, and your employer, as soon as all this stuff that comes out of your creative brain will be put into the machine, will lay you off and have everything written by AI.
Mm. I mean, no, not thrilled by the idea of that. However, I haven't seen from, ChatGPT anything nearly approaching innovative, inspiring
Yep.
wordcraft. So I'm a little bit skeptical that it can get there. Just being, there was this recent article by Ted Chiang, and I wish I remembered the name of the
Yes,
article,
it's
but
called the Ted Chiang article is amazing. Please,
yeah,
Monkey, look it up. It's called AI is a blurry JPEG or something like that. You'll find it.
yes,
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
exactly. Yeah, and so, he talks about the fact that, these these engines, these chat engines can only pull from things that are already created. So they struggle at being innovative, and who knows if they can ever get there. And his opinion is they can't. And
Mhm.
I kind of feel the same way. I've played around a little bit with ChatGPT, and it's good for helping me with puns. I'm not a huge punster, and so I've been able to get some functionality there. But everything else, I've plugged in. It's given me pretty pretty much trash.
Yeah, I mean, a garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I I don't want to bore people with this show is not about me, it's really about the guests. So I'm gonna restrain myself not to go on a complete tangent what I feel about it, but I do want to say two quick things. I'm gonna put up a slide here. This is from the writer's strike. This is a tweet by a guy who I don't know who that guy is, but he's tweeting here a picture of the people on strike. uh One guy has a sign says, I heard AI refuses to take notes. That's pretty funny. But the tweeter says, I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a tech guy. AI is wild and it will displace many jobs. I was just in Hollywood a few weeks back and saw a massive strike by the Writers Guild of America. They're fighting to save their jobs from AI. This tweet here is really good because, and I encourage you to read this article. This is South Paw Pod, and they're running a website, Liberation Martial Arts Substack, and they say, similar to McDonald's owning and controlling every step of the burger production process, these tech media companies are creating what can be called mech movies. They exercise complete ownership and control over every aspect of production. And I would add kind of what Bonnie's saying. The stuff is pretty bland and it's drawing from stuff that's out there. So apart from the sort of regurgitating ideas, uh, one could argue that most Marvel movies have already been written by AI. I mean, that's a little bit kind of my opinion. But one danger that I see is actually that the big owners of the methods of production, the capitalists, are going to uh, do a first draft by AI, and then they
Mhm.
hire people on a sort of precarious day-to-day situation, like a gig working situation, to punch it up. And
Yeah.
thereby they have basically, eliminated jobs that are stable, like they've done in other industries, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to, all the creative industries like screenwriting and like, directorial jobs, but at least in video game writing, there is already this tendency to hire contractors and not full-time employees,
I was
and
gonna say, Buddy, I
yeah.
mean, you and I were way ahead of the curve. We've been precariously employed for a long time. Welcome
Yeah.
to the club.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so in terms of covers, okay, I want to say like your cover is really awesome. Let's put this cover up because here's the book that I here. This is a picture I snapped in front of my bookshelf. Don't look at my shelf and my kids' pictures and that weird a rabbit next to the Thomas Pynchon books. But this cover is really awesome. So here's Bonnie's cover. Now, in contrast, because this AI thing fascinates me, and you just happen to be the guest when everybody's talking about AI, so I have to ask. I'm sorry to throw you not under the bus, but into the deep end of the pool. Let's see here. Where's my slide? Here is when I Googled AI covers for sale. This came up
Mhm.
in Germany. Cover design, easy cover design collection, 149 euros. Cover design premium made by AI, 249. For ebooks, 329 for the for book and ebook. Here's a bunch of covers that this one guy did from just as a test. Um, a cat named Bastion tied the Frozen Tower. He gave these titles, and then the AI came up with that. I don't know. I think they're pretty creepy. But what is much creepier is I think this here, and Shyla put this together. This is a guy who did experiments with AI, trying to replicate 70s covers. Now I love 70s covers of pulp, science fiction, and other stuff. I have many of those books in my shelf. And I know techies will say, well, yeah, we're at the early stages, Draxter. AI will learn and then it will do it better. Right now, this is the early days. Remember the early days of Second Life with Second Life crashing all the time? Yeah, what do you mean, yesterday? But anyways, uh, maybe it'll improve. But right now, this stuff to me looks crappy and creepy as hell. I don't know. What's your
Yeah.
what's your take on the current state of affairs of riff a little bit on the quality from your personal opinion, but then also publishers obviously think like, yeah, this is cool, this is pretty damn cheap.
Yeah, and I have seen some pushback from readers when they realize that a publisher has either knowingly or unknowingly, used AI art.
That's the
So
hope that their pushback comes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it does seem like as long as that's happening, maybe there will be minimal use. But um, I think at this point also it's kind of easy for trained eyes to see if it is AI or not, which is helpful. I personally can't see it unless there's a hand in the in the picture or something very, very obvious. Um, but I do like to see that readers are not quite going for it. And yeah, as to my cover, I do want to give a shout out to my friend who made the cover for me. His name's Chris Panettiere, and um, he is actually an excellent sci-fi fantasy horror writer himself, and an amazing
Mhm.
artist. And you should definitely check him out.
Say that name again slowly, and our
Yeah,
team will find his website and put it in the local chat.
Chris Panettiere, Panatier. There it is.
Ah, he's not the founder of Palantir. Good. Okay, so I'll put up your cover here, because just to as a palate cleanser. Also, people have asked me, Draxter Hellraiser, what's going on? I don't know what that is. Okay, here we go. Just a little image of Hellraiser. This is Pinhead. Uh, no relation to Needle Skin from your book, or maybe there is, who knows? So
Distant
yeah,
cousin.
just awesome. I mean, again, this is important, and Clive Barker, also an important author, British author. So here he is again, Pinhead with the puzzle cube. Now we are rushing on here. Let's go to the next reading. Hearty Appetites is a short story that you prepared for us. I mean, not only for us, I think it was prepared before, I guess, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's a short story that came out um,
In the
2 years
magazine.
ago, 2020, and it was in an anthology, which was all about future crimes.
Hmm. Now, and what is the anthology called? It's called The Way of the
Laser, The Way of the Laser, and unfortunately, the publisher is now defunct, but there's probably
ah,
still some copies out there somewhere.
they should have used AI. Bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have to ask you to stand up again, and I'll give you a little time to stand up. And yeah, Bonnie's jumping up and down out of joy over
Oh,
over
on the
AI. And now
table.
she's on the table,
I
some
am.
table
I'm doing a little
dancing.
dance.
Oh my God, we're gonna get banned from this place. Actually, people have been also I mean, publishers. I don't want to go on and on about this AI thing, but it's interesting that what you said about the pushback from readers. I think that's really good that you can sort of sense that they are uncomfortable with it. And the other thing is that, but the submissions, I guess, to magazines, right? People have
Mhm.
already submitted to magazines stories written by AI.
They have, yeah. I know my friend Neil Clark had to put a stop to his submissions for a while.
Like he put a complete stop on it.
Yeah, he was overwhelmed by submissions of AI written stories.
And did he say it's easy kind of to discern, or I mean it's just like, even
Oh,
if they get dumped, it's
yeah.
just,
He said they're very easy to discern because they're absolutely the most unoriginal and just horribly written things he's ever seen. So,
well, maybe when we're later, when we still have time, I actually asked ChatGPT to write an office comedy about me and my Second Life coworker Strawberry
oh,
Sue.
good.
So yeah, that's a fantastic script. It's fantastic, Bonnie. I mean, you don't want I don't you don't want me to submit this to a comedy magazine. But anyway, so what are we hearing? I'll shut up. Hearty Appetites.
Yeah, yeah, Hardy Up. So just a short excerpt from the short story. And this is in my short story collection, which will be coming out again. It was the same publisher, and so the publisher is no longer, but it is going to come out from a different publisher
That is
shortly.
cool. That's always the bummer when you put stuff on the publisher's gone. You
Mm-hmm.
don't Your own stuff is gone. You can't get it. Okay.
It is,
And
yeah.
here is Bonnie Stufflebeam with Hearty Appetites.
The villain of this story knew what it was to die. She died every day, power down, her vision a pinpoint, then non existent. This time was no different. The doctors took her pulse on the ER stretcher and pronounced her dead on arrival. In the morgue, the villain of this story removed her face. She returned it to its owner, a woman who signed herself into the morgue under one of the villain's many names. The villain gave the woman a pill. The villain stayed with her and coached her through the fading light. You'll be okay, she repeated to the woman. I do this every day. Once the woman was gone, the villain signed herself out. She left through the morgue's front doors. She let the cameras see her. They would not know her true face for the ghost it portrayed. Camille Maxwell had one rule: she didn't mix love and work. When her boyfriend Kingsley slunk into her office Monday morning with a ring box packed full of microscopic surveillance bugs, Camille shook her head. You know I don't do conflicts of interest, she said, snapping the ring box shut but sliding it into her desk drawer. You'll win no favors from me. Kingsley had dressed in Camille's favorite collared brown jacket and muted red sweater, the black jeans that hugged his legs. He sat in her client chair. Please, he said. I couldn't sleep last night. She's after me. I know it. Camille Maxwell knew to whom he referred, a rich man's bogey woman. All the tech CEOs discussed her in hushed voices at the poker nights Kingsley dragged Camille to once a month. Camille hated poker, but she loved taking Kingsley's friends for their money. After all, she needed it more than they did. She's not real, Camille said. Your dumb friends are just bad people. Robin Hood was a bogey woman and a vast conspiracy. Over the last year, 6 tech firms had been sued to pieces by the families of various dead women. The women had all died in work accidents. The families had won each case, and online media was rife with takedowns of the powerful men whose lax safety standards cost people their lives. Instead of admitting that they didn't give 2 shits about their workers and were now paying for their callousness, Kingsley's friends had decided that the women were in league with one another and that some other woman, Robin Hood, was the organizer behind it all. Camille laughed. I thought you were beyond all this. What made you change your mind? Kingsley reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. He slid it across the desk. Camille picked it up. The return address seemed fake. Nottingham Lane. No name, but when Camille unfolded the letter from its envelope, she saw that the writer had indeed signed it, Robin Hood. They probably call you a nice guy. Maybe you really love the people you love. That girlfriend of yours, she must see something in you. She knows the you that's kept hidden from the rest of the world. Your parents probably love you. They're probably proud. You may look at yourself in the mirror every morning and think that if these people see something in you. But I know you, Ralph Kingsley Gibson, beyond the secrets you keep from her, beyond the face you show the world. This is clearly a prank, Camille said, but she didn't refold the letter. Your so-called friends are messing with you. Maybe, Kingsley said. Maybe not. Camille had one rule. She'd broken it before, most notably when she had pushed the then married billionaire against her old, unused filing cabinet. Camille had always struggled with tossing out old things. She cupped her hand between his legs. He sucked the breath from her. She hadn't been touched by anyone in a long time. Kingsley's friends accused her of wanting his money, but more than that, she wanted to remember that she was a person in the world capable of lust and, later, love. Kingsley was tender and rough in turns, and he had not spoken ill of his cheating wife even as he paid Camille to gather the evidence. She needs someone who can give her more than I can give her, he had told Camille. I don't blame her for that, but I need to protect my business in the divorce. People depend on me. After they made each other come, they lay naked on the cold tile floor of Camille's office. Camille promised Kingsley that she would never depend on him. He had made no such promise in return. You know I don't do this, Camille said. You know you do, Kingsley said. I'll pay you double what you'd ask of someone off the street. Camille sighed. She woke her computer. She opened her standard contract template and edited the numbers. She bounced it over to his phone. Sign it, she said. Then we'll talk. Kingsley leaned over to try to kiss her, but she moved her face so his lips landed against her cheek. I won't fuck you until it's finished, she said. You'll just have to take comfort in one of those Playmates dolls or something. I'm sure Langston would cut you a serious deal. You and your rules, he said. Just sign the contract, she said. He smelled like a forest of artificial pine trees. It would be difficult to resist his body, but Camille was glad for an excuse to keep her from touching him. Her rules served one purpose, after all, to align the interests of her head with the itch of her heart. 3 months prior, when Camille first found Sadie Miller's lawsuit paperwork, she told herself she had not been snooping. She was not the kind of woman who should be invited into a lover's home. She made her living by sticking her nose where it didn't belong, and it was a habit that was hard to break. As Camille read, she felt faint, and anger rose up from her belly to her throat. What the fuck? She said out loud. She pulled her scanner from her pocket and swiped it against the sensor on the underside of her arm. All levels normal. It was not internal, then, this rage. No rise in blood pressure, no surplus of testosterone. She read on. She had not thought that Kingsley was a saint, far from it, but she hadn't thought that his misdeeds would feel so personal. It wasn't just that the ex-employee had sued Kingsley for the lung cancer she developed working on the car parts in his factory. It wasn't that he had hid the lawsuit from Camille. There was so much that the two hid from one another. It was the line at the bottom that got to her. In addition to Miss Miller's cancer, Miss Miller has suffered from hormonal disturbances believed to be influenced by the proprietary chemical R used in your electric automobiles. Camille scanned herself again. She opened up her phone and looked at the detailed results. Her own unbalanced hormones, the levels shifting wildly from month to month. She recalled the doctor who told her that no one knew why so many women were suffering, and maybe some unknown chemicals in our food or water was to blame. She remembered telling Kingsley about the initial diagnosis, how she wished that companies would take better care to ensure that their products were safe for consumers. He had agreed with her, had assured her that consumer safety was one of his goals. There on the floor of Kingsley's bedroom, Camille laughed until she cried.
Hmm. And that is Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam reading from Hearty Appetites. And Bonnie Jo Stufflebeam has sat down again. Brilliant. I was just looking at a quote that Shyla pulled from an interview that you did, which I really like. First of all, big round of applause for this reading. Really, really
Thank you.
awesome story. And you said that this will come out also in your own anthology. At
Yeah,
some
it was in
point.
a
Yep.
collection that came out last year, and
Oh,
it got really good reviews, and then, the publisher folded, so I did give it to a different publisher so it will come out at some point
but
again.
that is a collection of your stories or also an anthology of different people?
Oh, yeah, it's in a collection of my stories. It was in an
Ah, okay.
anthology, by different
No, no, no. I
people
know
as
where it
well.
was, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
coming
yeah.
out. It's coming out in
Yes.
your own. Um,
Yes.
this quote
Round
I
2.
like. I put it up on the slide projector. Finding out how to form a healthy balance between want and need, work and play, lust and friendship, hunger and satisfaction. It's a process that takes practice, lots of mistakes, and an iron will. Every day that I wake up and want to stay in bed rather than write, or every time I want to blow off some event I've promised I'll do, I'm channeling Roxanne. Roxanne again, the heroine in Glorious Fiends. And this is a great quote that resonates with me because I'm 52 and it took me a long time to figure this out about the about the that balance is really important and I've always been productive and maybe a little bit of a workaholic,
Yeah.
um which is the other side of the balance, but to kind of I mean talk a little bit about the importance or maybe a trick how you do that as a self-employed creative person. And I always tell people it's basically induced schizophrenia, if you will. You have to have these, well, you have the, Jekyll and Hyde basically in your head.
Mhm.
The one
Yeah.
guy wants to kind of, I don't know, party or whatever your thing is, and the other one says, no, 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 now it's time. You gotta you gotta do this. So you have to have your
Mhm.
own boss in your head if you want to produce things, for whatever. I mean, we can argue about, like, okay, why do I always have to produce things? That's not the point. If you choose to go on this path and you want to put stuff out, you have to finish it, and you can
Mhm.
only finish it if you create deadlines, and if you can extend them, but you have to meet them if there's nobody else out there cracking the whip. So how do you do that?
Yeah, and I definitely, for a long time, measured my self-worth by my productivity, and that
Hmm.
was, bad for me, and, went to therapy, and my therapist pointed it out and, didn't believe her, and you get a lot of anxiety. Your anxiety gets out of control, and you're like, "What could possibly be going wrong?" And your therapist is like, "Well, I told you. You're measuring your self-worth by your productivity and really burning yourself out." So, for me, the balance, it's always been relatively easy for me. I have a lot of drive, to sit down and to work. But for me, the balance is, in order to keep working every day, I have to make myself take breaks and have
Yeah.
fun and prioritize fun occasionally over work. And so that's really been the balancing act for me. But you know, as a creative, you get a lot of people who come up to you at events and say, "Oh, I have an idea for a screenplay or a book," and it could be so great. I could be a writer, and the truth is, yeah, anyone can be a writer. The only difference
Absolutely.
between someone who's a writer and someone who's not a writer is, do they sit down and do the writing?
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, I've struggled sometimes with, depression and not wanting to sit down. And I think that just learning what motivates you, whether it be proving to your haters that you can do the thing, or
Yeah, I mean,
um,
exactly, I think that's a legitimate, some people say, "Oh no, you shouldn't be motivated by that." Well, if it helps, utilize it, channel it, weaponize it.
yeah.
Why not?
or sometimes I've been motivated by, I'm having these nightmares. I would really like to not have these nightmares anymore. I should write a horror story by it. And so that's something that can be motivating for me. I also, discovered that positive rewards motivate me. So during periods when it's been difficult to sit down and work, I do have to, buy myself a little present if I will sit down for the day, or let myself have a nice little treat afterwards. Like,
Mhm.
I get to go get a coffee if I write my words for the day, that sort of thing. So I don't know. It's a learning process, and I'm only 34, so I'm still figuring it out. But I
No,
feel
that's
like I get
really good
better at it
stuff.
every day.
Absolutely. And that's really helpful stuff. And I think it's really important that I always try to remind young folks that this, what you pointed out here, is so important. It's inevitable. We're all in this, in this system where um, productivity is worshipped and it's measured by a
Mhm.
measurable output. And people go, oh, this guy has 15 books out, or this guy has 5 movies or whatever. And we had an author here, Antoine Wilson, who is fantastic, a highly regarded author, actually. Look him up, folks. Antoine Wilson, one of the big literary writers in America right now, and he only has 3 books, and the third one just came out, Mouth to Mouth, fantastic. All his 3 books are amazing, and he talked in our interview a little bit about that it's definitely you know gnawing at him, even if he says to himself, I don't really care what people think. I need my time. I'm gonna come up with something really cool. But you cannot be. We're not living in a vacuum, and it takes some discipline also to not let yourself be constantly influenced by those measuring, these dick measuring contests. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are we? Oh, we're out of time. Okay. Goodbye. No. We have one more reading, and then I have a little. Well, we'll see, because you did actually a very cool project with your husband called
Mm,
Strange Monsters. Really cool music. Um, but let's do a reading, because Grim Root is a novel
sure.
that's coming out next year. This year is it's a novel that is a debut, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
You
I
would
have
say.
not had a novel out yet, and so this will be my first novel, and it is coming out next year. And actually, Strange Monsters was done with my ex-husband, so I won't be
Oh,
totally sad if it
oh,
doesn't get played. But
that is
um,
sad. Is that sad
yeah,
for you? Should I rather not play it?
no, it was a fun project to do, but unfortunately, relationships sometimes don't work out. I am remarried and much happier,
Ah,
so
okay. Well, your ex-husband was that was jazz. Maybe you're married to a metal guy now, so it's all good. I
yeah, punk man.
Good. So I study jazz classical, but I also play metal. So in case if you, I mean, I'm married. I mean, don't get any ideas. I guess if it doesn't work out with that guy, don't call me. I'm just kidding. Um, this is German humor. Now, because you mentioned novel versus novella,
Mhm.
um, Shyla prepared a slide. Where is it? Hold on, let me see it. Here we go. So this is straight from Wikipedia, I guess. A novel is a relatively long work of narrative fiction. I don't know if ChatGPT wrote these answers. Novella
Probably.
novella is a narrative prose fiction whose length is shorter than most novels. Oh, you don't say. A short story is also known as nouvelle, is a piece of prose fiction that can typically be read in a single sitting and focuses on a self-contained incident. What to you is the difference between, now, with your work, this upcoming work, and uh Glorious Fiends?
Yeah, so
What's
those
the difference?
categories are really only helpful for three reasons. One is, which magazines can you submit this to, or which publishers
Ah,
can you submit this to? Do the publishers only take novellas, or will they take novels? Do they only take short stories? So all of the categories are kind of set by the genre. Being in horror, sci-fi, fantasy, I tend to go by those word limits, and so a novel is 50,000 words and higher. So there are some publishers who will not take anything but a novel. There are some publishers who will take everything up to novel. Um, And then the second reason is awards consideration. So there are awards like the Nebulas and the Hugos, and all of those categories are based on the word length
Uh-huh.
of the different stories. So, best novel, the story or the book has to be 50,000 words. And then best novella, it has to be, between a certain threshold, and best novelette, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third thing is, how to market it and which people will pick it up. So some people just like to read short things, and so they'll read a novella over a novel any day.
Right, but okay, so quick question, hypothetical, but before you start reading, would you consider if I were like the big publisher, whatever, and you bring this to me and I go like, you know what, if you cut this down a little bit, you cut this stuff, then I'll publish it as a novella and you have one, two, three, four, five advantages. Plus well, biggest one, I'll buy it. But I guess this question is like art versus commerce. Would you cut this if you just to do that?
I'm a genre writer, so yes. I feel like more so than, more literary writers, genre writers are very much about, how can I, I have to live, I have to eat. So how can I make this art? And also I have to get this, getting the work out to people is more important than, a few arbitrary scenes that maybe aren't wholly necessary to the story and could even be put out as like a little short story later or something.
But if
Um,
you feel it's necessary, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know some literary writers, they also like to eat. Some of them
yes,
even like to drive in cars.
it's so true. Yeah.
No, I understand your point. You feel like what you're basically saying is that literary fiction, there's a construction here, a careful construction where everything is sort of linked together, and all these elements like this house would collapse if you take out one thing. But you're suggesting that genre writers, I mean,
Genre writers are more open to the
I could
commercialization, I
be
feel like, of their
provocative and
work.
take your statement to say like, okay, you're just assembling this from pre-configured tropes like ChatGPT, and so it's
Mhm.
easy to remove one of them. Is that what you're saying?
No, for me personally, I am an underwriter, so, I don't know what that has to do with anything
Underwriter.
except yeah, like
Mhm,
yeah, an underwriter in the way that I tend to write less
mhm,
than I need to get the point across.
mhm,
Oftentimes people will read my work and they'll be like, "This doesn't make any sense. It needs more words."
mhm.
But I do feel like the majority of writers are overwriters, at least in the workshops that I'm in and that I facilitate. There are a lot of people who write too much. They get too excited. And so I do feel like there are a lot of works of literature that could stand with fewer scenes. And I mean, obviously, if an editor is telling you to change the story and that doesn't feel true to your vision, no writer is going to take
Yeah.
those notes unless they're just absolutely starved for a little tiny amount of money, because honestly, I mean, writing doesn't pay that much. Um,
That's what I
but I
would
do
say. I mean, I would say like, you know what?
yeah.
I'm already doing this. I'm doing something that is already not really compensated well and not really
Mhm.
respected much in my family. They were still waiting for me to get a real job, and I'm, whatever how old I am, I might as well just do my vision, hook, line, and sinker. But no, I understand your
Mhm.
point, and granted, me my question is just super broad here because I think it
Yeah,
depends on a case by case basis. You can't
very
just say like I
hypothetical.
would do exactly like something like, okay, wait a minute, they want me to take this out. No, this is the absolute core of the story the way I see it.
Mhm.
There's a David Cronenberg story where he was working on somebody's script and they hired him to rewrite it or something, and they said like, oh, we want this to make it Cronenbergish, that's why we hired you. And he goes like, okay, I'll do it. And then they gave him notes to remove this, remove that, remove this. And then a year later,
Mhm.
the executive said, wait a minute, it's not working. Why is it not working? And he said, well, you hired me to be myself, and then you removed every part that is me, and that's why it's
Mhm.
crap. So,
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, my point was, us genre writers, we will write novelizations or write in someone else's world,
right,
and
right, right. Yeah. Yeah,
So, I just feel like, work as product is a little bit more of a palatable idea in certain circles.
I understand. Not in mine, Bonnie. I'm just an uncompromising artist. I'm an artiste.
Well,
I
that's
get
okay.
up at
That's your
5.
prerogative as well.
Yeah, and then I lay naked in the sun, smoke a doobie, and wait for inspiration. No, let's read. This is Grim Root novel coming out in 2024.
Yeah, so it'll come out in June.
What is it
Um,
about?
yeah, so the premise is that a group of women on a reality TV dating show, kind of similar to one that rhymes with the Catchler, compete for the hand of an eligible bachelor by spending a week in a haunted house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very
And
good.
so this is chapter 28. There are 2 points of view, and I can shorten this excerpt just a little bit, just read a tiny little amount. But it's a horror novel, and it's kind of got some gothic haunted house stuff in it, and some dark humor, and a little bit of reality TV satire.
Okay, good. Because I don't watch enough reality TV.
I think the tropes will be obvious to even people who don't.
Awesome. Okay, Bonnie, go ahead. This is from
All
Grim
right,
Root.
Grimmer. Before the reshoot, the daylight that beat down on Linda was a comfort, even if she knew there was no rational reason to believe horrible things only happened at night. As a little girl, each morning held the promise of a cornucopia of peaceful hours. Her father went to work before she woke, and even if breakfast consisted simply of toast sprinkled with cinnamon, she savored the way she could eat it in silence. School was easy for her in terms of the work, less so when it came to making friends, but the lonely lunch hours were manageable if it meant finishing her sandwich to a background roar of chatting children. She was a teacher's pet who always followed the rules and never spoke out of turn, and she repeated the words of praise she received every night, a lullaby to lull herself to sleep despite the voices screaming upstairs. Night arrived with the crunch of her father's car tires. He kept vodka bottles under his seats and poured shots into a fast food drink cup the moment he started the car, so by the time he pulled into the driveway, he was already swerving. When he walked in the door, Linda hid from the stench of his breath until dinner, when her mother forced her to the table. They learned not to speak, for her father's drunkenness kept him from understanding their conversation and led to frustrated tirades against them for being obtuse. They learned not to take him up on his offers of going out for ice cream. His driving led them more than once into a ditch. They learned not to linger too long. Their presence itself burdened him. Evening arrived at the manor the same way. Before the walk in the orchard, Deja, the producer, made Linda reshoot a banal scene in which she had been eating a power bar during a conversation with Sabrina, another contestant. Deja wanted the food to be gone and the speech to be clear, so Linda stood in the foyer talking to an orange vase while Tatum, the bachelor, filmed her, parroting Sabrina's lines as cues. Linda finished faking a laugh as the setting sun descended through a tiny circular window, rosy and gold. She shivered. Don't look cold, Tatum said. You looked warm in the other shots. Linda progressed through the rest of her lines in a strange daze. If she thought about it rationally, she didn't believe the house was haunted, but the people in it were. Every last one of them gripped tight to their secrets, the same as her, and Deja knew the burial place of every closeted skeleton. We can stop there since we're
It's
tight
so
on time.
good. No, no, no. But keep
Yeah.
going. Keep
Okay.
going till
Sure.
the end. I have it here.
Okay.
It is really good. It's
All
good.
right.
Keep going.
Linda tore into her lip with her teeth as Tatum set up the orchard for their scene. Beyond the foyer's windows, it was so devoid of light that it looked like someone had hung black sheets over the elaborate stained glass. She closed her eyes, trying to rest, but Brandon's hung body, that's another producer who died, the black rings around his neck from the vine's caress, flashed beneath her eyelids. Still, she could fake it with Tristan, the way she'd always done. She pressed a hand to her heart. It was chilly in the room and in her chest. Before her arrival on the show, she hadn't realized how much she hadn't been feeling. At the manor's front entrance, Tristan jerked open the door and offered her his arm. Shall we go repeat ourselves? He said. She forced a smile as she slipped her arm through his. They would repeat the last lines from their prior conversation, then kiss, then continue as though they had never been interrupted in the first place. They walked once more through the archway to the apple orchard, their feet crushing the cool grass. They walked that center path where Linda had told Tristan about her family, her cat, And Linda tried to keep her hands from shaking as Tristan interlaced their fingers. The ornamental lights shone so bright she could not see the stars above. This time, Linda didn't touch the tree's rubbery wood, but she recalled that texture, like healed wounds on fresh skin. She avoided touching the apples that dangled from the trees and lay rotting on the ground, recalling their strange insides spread out on the floor of the den. "Thanks for being so understanding about my family," she said, as she had said that night, and she pulled at Tristan's hand, tugging him closer. "Everyone has their demons." He bent to her, and their lips met for an instant. When he pulled back, he left his hand on her waist. It was clammy. He pulled her into a hug, using the gesture to whisper into her ear. "I would never let you win," he said. Linda frowned. She caught herself and moved free from him, forcing that smile to return, but her stomach twisted at the idea that he still believed she wanted him. As she turned away and ran down the path, light shifted in the leaves and sent little dancing shadows like bruises across her. Her heel sunk into the too soft dirt, sending her toward the bushes between two trees, and though she caught her balance, her shoe popped off, held aloft by the soil. When she yanked it free, it made a sickening, sucking sound. Tristan called after her, her name in that twee twang. She stepped back into the brush. The terrible fruit brushed the top of her head as she knelt into the dirt. It stunk of rot, not the rot of apples, but like pus and blood, an infected wound. Tristan screamed. Linda heard him fall, a great thud. Then another crunch, like teeth biting into bone. He screamed harder, a shrill sound she'd not heard him make before. Linda shook herself free from the momentary fear that had gripped her. She bounded from her hiding spot, and the thing attacking him was a blur on which she couldn't focus. And then Deja was there with a rock in her hand, and the thing was dead on the ground. For a moment, she wondered if Deja might bring the rock down upon Tristan next. Her heart throbbing, she rushed forward as though to stop it. The paranoia faded as quickly as it had come. "What the hell was that?" Linda inspected Tristan's unconscious body. "Oh my God, is he okay?" She started to kneel. "Get away from him." Deja kicked a cloud of dirt at Linda. Linda fell back onto her ass. A jolt of pain shot up her spine. "Tatum, take her inside, now." The cameraman offered her his hand. As he pulled her away, she peered back over her shoulder, angling for a final glimpse. Tristan's shoulder gushed blood despite the bunched fabric Deja pressed against it. The dead creature sprawled on the ground was white with gray veins running through its outer surface, the sheen of its skin reflecting the spotlights above. It had rodent-like ears and a long snout. It looked like an abomination of a possum, something one might find stitched together in a curio shop, its paws and mouth bloodied with Tristan's carnage.
Grim Root,
Grim Root.
coming out 2024. Thank you. Fantastic reading. Bonnie Stufflebeam, many stories all around the interwebs and her own website, magazines and such, and compilations, anthologies, and her own anthology. Grimroot coming out from Dark Matter Inc. I think is the publisher. There you go.
Mhm.
And Glorious Fiends out right now, right here in front of us on the table. Thank you so much for coming here.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun.
There's a big vampire community. I made a story about them. Vampires made in SL. So if you ever come back, you can hang out with them. They are
Oh, absolutely.
they're fascinating. They're also a little creepy. Um, they believe they're
As vampires are.
vampires. And Sassy Scarborough actually has a question. She had the question. Okay, last question. Very quick answer. Would it change? Would your writing differ if you were independently wealthy?
Mhm.
Before you answer that, I would say, and this was my most retweeted tweet, where I tweeted, behind every successful artist is a spouse with health insurance. Um, but go ahead, Bunny. Imagine.
Yeah. Well, I have a day job, and so I'm not freelance, which is nice. I do have health insurance through them. And it is the game writing, so it's creative in its own way. And would it change? Well, the problem is, this is the first novel I've sold, but it's not the first novel I've written because they've been summarily rejected by every publisher they've been sent to so far. Despite having an agent and having all of the things that the the community tells you you're supposed to have. So I
Mm,
don't feel like it would differ very much.
yep.
I tend to be somewhat boundary crossing, genre crossing in style and experimental in substance. And so I feel like, uh, it hasn't been commercial so far, and
I think that's a
it
great
wouldn't
answer. I
change.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean there's some consistency on your vision where you're uh, I mean, this is my take. Again, this is not my show here with my monologues about my opinion. We want to learn from the guests. I just would say my advice is always to try to be as uncompromising as you can, not stubborn, but also keep in mind that people who reject stuff or give you notes, th- they may be in a position of influence and power and decision making, but that doesn't mean that they know more than you do. I mean, especially
Mhm.
in the field of writing or film or music. I mean, there are executives and decision makers. I mean, I come from the music industry. There's any number of A&R guys who may have had a hit in something and then kind of deducted from that they know what the secret sauce is. Nobody knows what the secret sauce is. People
Yeah.
the industry, they have numbers, they have sales numbers they
Mhm.
base their decisions on, but tastes change and there are markets that have been ignored, blah blah blah. But anyways, fantastic conversation. Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, audience on YouTube and in World. Kitten Duel was on YouTube earlier. Good to see you, Kitten. And let me just run through the credits here real quick. We don't have a tip jar. Shyla, try to res the tip jar now, because might be possible to bring up the tip jar. And I actually don't have my credit slides here today, but so that's good. That saves us me repeating them. The Second Life Book Club is every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, but I'm currently working on a special documentary for the Second Life 20th birthday. So we will not meet until the premiere, which is on June 23rd. You're welcome to, everybody's welcome, of course, to wander around, check out the past shows on YouTube. We have 4 islands here with tons of book worlds that have links to the authors, worlds to explore that explore the themes of these books. So I apologize, but I really have to focus on this film. It's a big project that we're squeezing into a very short amount of time. This show is produced by yours truly, the camera sound by Isabel Charend, avatars are made by Bespoke Caravan, research by Shyla the Super Gecko and Monkey. The location is always second.live/book club. This is a URL on the internet. If you go on the internet and you go to the second.live/book club, you can teleport to the location where the show is at. We changed the location, but we have a teleport in world that brings you there. So that's that. We have a whole bunch of big guests coming up. Matt Ruff with his sequel to Lovecraft Country is coming back. Sarah Littman, who um, writes amazing YA with technology. She was on the show before. Fantastic. So please do tip Shyla. She'll distribute it. Thank you for the volunteer staff, Shyla, Monkey, and Isabel. Shyla will distribute the funds. Um, to the team. That's it, and I'll see you all soon. Again, I'm sorry to I'm gonna go into hiding until this movie is done. Good night, good day, and good morning to Australia, I guess. Goodbye.